Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wisdom Seeker Live. I'm glad to have you join us today, whether it's on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. Thanks for being here. Really excited to share the next hour or so with everyone. And our topic today is overcoming fear and anxiety by gaining wisdom about it. It's a real issue in our current circumstances, and it seems to be at least not getting better and maybe getting worse. I don't know, but I'm real compelled that this is a conversation that we need to have. Just a couple of housekeeping notes as you join the broadcast. If you would, be sure and share your location where you're joining from. Love to know that. And during the podcast, want to be sure to have you ask questions and share thoughts in the comments, because that just makes for a better podcast. Another housekeeping note is that I let people know that I am operating 3 screens. So if I appear to be distracted, I promise that I'm not, that I am working to make our podcast work and be effective. And welcome, Rosemary and Zaid. Anna, good to see you again. Pushkar, glad to have you, and appreciate you all joining. Again, if you would, Rosemary, thanks for letting us know you're joining from Sydney, and Anna from Virginia here in the U.S. So let us know, because I think others are interested in knowing where people join from. And so I appreciate you being here. And just as a reminder of how we view wisdom here on the podcast, and that is, it's a journey, a process that begins with knowledge, facts, figures, information we gain. We can find it via Google, just lots of different sources. And then the next step in that process, or the journey into wisdom, is to gain understanding. And that understanding comes from experience. We can know lots of things. In fact, we are, by some accounts, considered a knowledge society. And with that in mind, we have lots of facts and figures rolling around in our heads, which is fine. But if we do not have a way to use it, then we are then lacking, if you will, because we need understanding and we need to apply it. And so that's the second step in the process or journey to wisdom. And then the last part of that journey or process is to begin to see things from a much larger perspective, and that is outside of ourselves and a big picture. And for those of us that are of a spiritual bent, the way I like to put it is, we want to be able to see what's going on around us through God's eyes. And so that's what we see as the wisdom journey. It's not an event, it's a process. And the goal is that as we come together each week, is that we want to help each other in that journey along the way to gain wisdom. And so appreciate it. Welcome, Panda. And Panda is a friend from India. And Rosemary, I see you reference Chris Christofi. Glad to have you, Chris. I'm not seeing you on my screen, but that's okay. I'm glad you're here, and welcome aboard, and look forward to hearing comments from everyone as we have this discussion. It's not about just hearing me talk. It's about indeed having discussion and sharing our wisdom and gaining that much bigger insight, much bigger perspective, especially outside of ourselves. So what I like to do as we take on new topics is I like to just get some common understanding of the topic. And I do that by defining terms. I know sometimes we think that it should be obvious what these things mean, but I find that the challenge that we face going into lots of communication discussion is that we don't have a common understanding of the terms and words we use. So let me get this up, and I always start with the simple because I guess I'm a simple guy. But let's start by looking at the definition of fear, and I hope you can see that. Let me make that a little larger, just to help us all. Some of us, our eyesight is challenged because we're of a little more mature age. But fear is defined as an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. That's the noun version. Verb version of it is be afraid of someone or something as likely to be dangerous, painful, threatening. Okay, so that's what fear is about. And we're going to do some comparison because we talk a lot about fear in our world, but it also creates also factors in with anxiety. Wow, welcome, Sam. Glad to have you. Dr. Singh, Iqbal, glad to have you. And again, if I mispronounce your name, please help me learn. But we also have Supam. Glad to have all of you. It's great to see everyone here. So as we look at what is fear, that's the dictionary definition. The other thing that I always like to do is to look at visuals of what we're seeing, because that is, I guess I'll always be a teacher at heart. And so I like to make sure that I share information in different ways, because different people learn different ways. And I think it's interesting to see what we see as images of fear. I especially like this one because I think that's the way we often feel, is we are tiny inside of this big monster that's causing us to fear. And then we have, lots of different images that help kind of capture the emotion that we feel when we're under fear. So that's fear. And I'll get to your comments in just a moment. I so much appreciate you all sharing your thoughts, because that's a big part of it. So let's look also at anxiety, because anxiety is at least a part of this whole situation. And according to the dictionary online, is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. And within the realm of psychiatry, anxiety even has a clinical description, if you will, a nervous disorder characterized by a state of excessive uneasiness and apprehension, typically with compulsive behavior or panic attacks. So one thing that seems to be notable and different between fear and anxiety is the idea that it is viewed, anxiety is viewed medically as a condition or a concern. And then when you look at the visuals on anxiety, you kind of get the essence of anxiety being more than maybe a single fear, but a collection of fears, I would say, and that it becomes to a point of controlling. And so, just again, this is so we're kind of on the same page as we talk and share about fear and anxiety. One question I'd like to throw out, I'm going to want to highlight some of your comments, but sometimes I like to kind of do a reality check for myself, because the reason I hit these topics is I feel like they are topics that are of interest and or concern in our current culture. Do you all see that fear and anxiety is of concern? I mean, are we talking about a topic that people are really interested in? And so while I give you a moment to think about that, I'll share some of the comments that have been made. I appreciate that. Let's see. I appreciate this from Panda. That wisdom requires lots of patience to understand what we want for ourselves. It certainly does take a lot of patience, and it's something that we have to work through. And wisdom sometimes is quick because of circumstances. Most of the time, it's a growth process, and we have to go through it and work through it. And then some thoughts that you share from about fear and all, and these are helpful, is fear is negativity that pulls us back. I like that. Okay, this is good from Iqbal. Fear is about loss. Yeah, I see that and agree with that, that quite often the things we fear are because we identify that that it will include a loss, whatever it is. And let's see, continuing on down. Let's see here. Fear, okay, from Pushkar. Fear is a lack of pleasure. Certainly the case that fear takes away any pleasures we might have quite often. Dr. Singh shares anxiety and fear, they have co-relationships. Completely agree that they are connected together. And let's see here. And then Sam comments, from me, I've discovered that fear has a lot to do with not having control, especially in terms of those things in my life that are most important. Certainly that can drive fear because, fear is driven by the unknown, if you will. And then welcome, Zaid, glad to have you. And then Rosemary shares that anxiety is a medical diagnosis over a sustained length of time. Fear is transient in nature. Yeah, I like that, Rosemary. I see that as a good way to differentiate. And then Zaid shares that I think fear and anxiety are both healthy emotions to help us face danger and other harmful elements. Once it's out of control is when we have issue. I agree, Zaid, that fear and anxiety are certainly part of how we're designed. My question and challenge becomes, I don't believe that we are intended to be controlled by it or live in a state of either fear or anxiety. And what we find in our world today is a lot of people, especially to me, kind of as the old saying goes, the straw that broke the camel's back has, in this regard, has been the pandemic and all that it entails. And it concerns me that I hear, read I know of people that have been so impacted by this that they are just living in a state of fear, and that they're, as a result of being in the state of fear, that it causes us to get into maybe even mental health concerns over anxiety. And I see a lot of people in the state of living with anxiety, and that concerns me. And I think that we need to look at some wisdom in this so that we can have the ability to overcome this and deal with this for ourselves as well as for others, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And let's see, Dr. Singh offers anxiety is a generalized response to an unknown threat or internal conflict, whereas fear is focused on known. Okay, that's a good distinguishment, Dr. Singh. I like that. That maybe part of the difference between fear and anxiety is known versus unknown. That's a good thought. And, you know, any of you that have spent time with us on the Wisdom Seeker Live know that part of where I go for some insight and wisdom is the Bible. And whether you agree with the tenets of the faith described in the Bible, it is a good source of insight for us all. And it's very interesting that in the Bible that there are 365 references to anxiety in the Bible, one for each day, and it's talking about how not to be anxious. And I think that's important. One of the things that I've learned a lot from my business partner, friend, brother, Anton Andrakov, is that anxiety is part of stress, and the physical implications of living in that state are remarkable. The chemical reactions in our bodies during anxiety and stress can be very, very powerful, the chemicals we produce as a result. And we make it a point to begin to understand that, because it leads to others to other issues related that come out in physical form. Welcome. Oh my goodness, I'm going to do my best with your name in Indiritu. Welcome, and appreciate your comment. He is obviously someone that likes the wisdom found in the Bible. Welcome. And let's see, Sam has a comment. Says, I may be too old. I don't feel that I have a fear of death, but find myself in a state of anxiety due to what I know and I'm witnessing taken in our place in our world currently. Yeah, understanding wisdom is bliss. Yeah, there are moments, Sam, where I pray that I could be a little bit ignorant, and but God doesn't seem to have that in my future, and I have to stay aware. And what I'm finding is that the good news is it's causing me to have to grow in wisdom and find ways to address it. And then my hope and desire is to pass that along to others, because I believe that's part of what we're all designed for, among other unique qualities. And so, yeah, there are days I pray for ignorance to get a little bliss in it, and it's just not there at this point. So let's see what Rosemary offers. Fear is a fight or flight mechanism. It is an instant release of cortisol and adrenaline, which is designed to help us to focus on immediate danger, and that confronts us, whereas anxiety is the unknown challenges that our minds create and repeat on endless replay and build into massive overreaction with results in a toxic overload of stress hormones. Very well put, Rosemary. You've got a lot of good information in there and truth. One of the things that has always caused me to take thought is that, we talk about our heart and our circulation and all, and the challenges we have there. And they say, well, eat right and get exercise and everything will be fine. And that is part of it. Please don't take this as a criticism of eating right or staying fit. But I have had personal friends that were the peak of seeming health in that they ate right, better than I did, exercised, and were more fit than I am. And then I watched them pass away with heart attacks. And what a body of science that I started learning about years ago has to do with this whole concept of fear and anxiety, and the fact that when you were talking about the production of cortisol, Rosemary, one of the things that goes on with cortisol is the production of cholesterol. It's all part of our system and how it deals with its needs as it happens. But what we are doing to ourselves physically is that we're living in a state of anxiety. So rather than the fight or flight that we have to have at times because we encounter tough situations, we are living in a state of elevated fear or anxiety all the time. So along with cortisol, our bodies are pumping out cholesterol. It doesn't matter if we are physically fit, doesn't matter if we eat right, it's happening. And what bothers me about it is that quite often it is ignored. And for those of you that like to discuss the whole area of stress and anxiety directly, you can always join me and the Perspective Force team on Tuesdays at 11. We talk a great deal about stress and how to identify it and deal with it. So let's see, Dr. Singh offers some insight. Says symptoms of anxiety and fear. Symptoms: feeling nervous, restless, or tense. Yes. Having a sense of impending danger, panic, or doom. And those things happen whether they are reality or not. And increased heart rate. Yes. Breathing rapidly, hyperventilation. Yeah, those are all symptoms of anxiety and fear being out of control, as Zaid shared, and definitely something to watch for. Welcome, Satish. I see you're here. Satish is someone that is with us fairly regular, and he poses a question. Dr. Singh, besides anxiety stays, whereas fear goes away soon. Do you agree? I'll let Dr. Singh answer that question. And so a lot to learn and deal with. And as we identify the symptoms and understanding, I want to make sure before we finish up that we begin to look at some practical ways, some wisdom, how to see these issues in a bigger perspective, and then how to be effective in overcoming them. Let's see. Zaid shares, when we face danger that we can't see or know where it's coming from, our reptilian brain will continue to be activated and our muscles are activated by extra rush of cortisol. But when the front lobe can't analyze and figure out what we're facing and how to face it, then it ends up being a mental status. Okay, good explanation into the physical implications of fear and anxiety. And so as we talk and as we consider the implications of living in anxiety, to me, it reinforces that what the Bible says is that we don't need to be there. And that's why we have 365 different statements to address the idea of being anxious or living in anxiety. So we did identified them, and I think that we agree that fear is the short-term status, the fight or flight, and it. By the way, I know that sometimes people will talk about being fearless, and I appreciate the intent of being fearless, and that that is seemingly a desired state, but I think that we have to be careful. You know, anyone that follows much of what I do knows that balance is so critical. But being fearless, I think, leads people to do some dumb things, because fear, as Zaid had commented, is there for a reason. It's there to protect us, because there are moments where we have things to be fearful of, and it takes on different forms for each of us. And so I don't think it's wise to seek to be fearless. I don't think it's realistic either, because the only way I think we can do that is to short circuit our design, and I don't think that's healthy either. So, and then basically, I think as we have seen from everybody's comments, that anxiety is related to fear. Certainly, there is that interconnectivity, and maybe a way to look at it is anxiety is a buildup of fear that we can't overcome with just a fight or flight response, but it just hangs there over our head, on our hearts and our minds, and really begins to affect what we're about and what we do and who we are. And in its worst state is it leads to hopelessness. And I know that right now there is a real concern with the suicide rate and where it has moved to among people. It's always been an issue for veterans because of PTSD and some of those factors. But what we're seeing now is that suicide is on the rise in the general population, and it's because a lot of people have become hopeless. Welcome, Gary. Oh, welcome, Jaron. Glad to have you. I can't remember. I think this might be your first visit with us. Mm-hmm. Welcome. And so anxiety is a state that we get into that that is unhealthy for us. And do you, again, I would like your input. Do you all see that we have a state of anxiety that is seemingly become ever present in our cultures now? Is that something that you all observe? And so I'd like your feedback on that. Dr. Singh talks about ways to fight our fears: take time out. Oh yeah, measured response, counting down, taking deep breaths are a lot of ways to consider that. And it is impossible to think clearly when you're flooded with fear or anxiety. Breathe through a panic, face the fears, so accept them, acknowledge them. Imagine the worst. Yeah, that's the one that I use, Dr. Singh. Look at the evidence. Don't try to be perfect. Visualize a happy place. Talk about it. Lots of good ideas. And let's see, Sam asked a question. Is much of fear learned, and can faith help us unlearn it? Great question, Sam. Again, my perspective on it is that one of the keys to overcoming and avoiding anxiety is our faith. And we'll talk about that a little more in a little bit. I want to get some of the other comments in. Gary shared that anxiety is a fear buried in the subconscious trying to serve. Okay, that's insightful, Gary. Thanks for sharing that. And just really thinking through that, that anxiety is fear that's been buried, maybe. And I agree. Let's see. All right. So let me kind of hit on a high level about my thoughts on faith. And Sam, to answer your question, yes, I think that faith goes a long way because our faith offers us a different perspective, a bigger perspective that hopefully is based historically and has the, as Dr. Singh suggests, the time element that we can call on from people that have lived it previously. And so, yes, I think faith offers that. And I think it gives us insight into who we are and who we're meant to be, not just who we are. And I think that it also gives us an outlet, because I know that at moments that when I become fearful, that I can share my fear, my concerns with God, and it makes a difference. You know, one of the things I suggest is that prayer is not to change God's mind, but to help us get God's mind, and it's for us more than it is for God. So just a thought there. But with that in mind, it helps us to relate and have someone, should I say, and the way I see it, someone that is bigger than us, bigger than our circumstances, that can help us, that even when we don't know, if we know that our God, our Creator, knows, and then the other part of that loves us, and the desire is for good for us, when we can rely on that, it helps even deal with some of the unknown fear there. Welcome, Scott. Welcome, Brian. Good to see you guys with us. Glad to have you. And indeed, though, faith is a real key. And I have to be just real transparent. I've gone through a lot of different times in my life where I faced fears and anxieties and even hopelessness. And the main thing that got me through that was my faith and the trust. And my faith became very simple. It got down to, I knew that God loved me and that He wasn't going to forsake me. And I had to hold tight onto that, because at the moment, you know, dealing with mental, emotional issues, at going through those struggles, it became real critical that I have that anchor. For me, that was the anchor in my storm. So let's get back to some of your comments. What did Jesus say about fear? He said, "Do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus He comforted them and spoke kindly to them. "You shall not fear them, for it is the Lord your God who fights for you." And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear and do not be dismayed." Yes, Jesus was very clear about not fearing and spoke to it on many of occasions and many other places. And by the way, I've got to put a plug in here. I have been recently watching a series that I would highly recommend to any of you to watch, and it's called The Chosen. And basically, it is an amazingly well done portrayal of the life of Jesus. And I really encourage you. You can watch it for free. Different sources for that. So really encourage you to check that out. Welcome. I just saw Jane Lehman. Thank you for being here. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. And yeah, okay. Now Rosemary, I think you read my mind sometimes because you're making a comment that I've got to. I'm glad you brought it up, but I definitely want to address it because I know I am so confident that this is part of our present issue. But bad news sells newspaper. It leads every news break on radio, and TV talk back radio and social media feed on the bad news. COVID-19 and the invisible nature of the virus has people jumping at shadows and wondering when or if the pandemic will end. I rarely turn on the TV or read newspaper headlines. Okay, Rosemary, you've spoken to my concern and my passion, and I agree with you. And frankly, for those of you that have been following along with Wisdom Seeker, when it first started in January, one of the challenges I issued to everyone was to take on a 40-day Wisdom Seeker challenge. And I will share a little more about that in a moment. I want to get to continue to share your comments because they're so valuable. Jane shares that another passage, he said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid, just believe. And so true, so true. And and let's see. And Rosemary follows on with, I know and trust my Lord will never ask me to carry out more than I'm able to. Wow, yes, that is such a great and wise perspective to offer, Rosemary, because of if we trust God's character, we know that his desire for us is for good, and excuse me, and therefore we're not going to be put in circumstances that are going to overcome us. That is not our design. That is not his character. And I think having that understanding, not just the understanding, but belief. And got to do a little side note here. Understanding is great. Knowledge and understanding are great. But until it becomes a belief, a conviction, something that we will stake our life on, or that we can give our trust to, then we are not where we need to be in regards to. It's good information, but until it becomes a belief or conviction, it isn't going to impact us as it's designed to do. And Jane shares another comment. I've learned to overcome fear. You're so right. If we have faith, we don't have to fear. I read somewhere that you either have faith or fear. You can't have both. Jesus told us many times not to be afraid. And in fact, again, the scriptures tell us that, perfect love casts out fear. And so to fear, and I hope I'm not getting too preachy here. I don't mean to go there, but certainly something to consider is that if we fear or we stay in anxiety, we're telling God we don't believe him and we don't think he loves us. Something to think about. And let's see, Brian shares, the old song says, you'll find a little talk with Jesus makes it right. Yeah, I like some good songs, Brian. I think they offer us perspective, certainly offer us some comfort at times and encouragement. And just good way to deal with fear sometimes, by the way, and anxiety is to find some real positive, encouraging, and uplifting music to listen to. And I appreciate that several of you have spoken or shared links to The Chosen. I am not, as I've grown older, TV's allure has lost any glitter and allure to me, but I have to say that I am thoroughly enjoying watching The Chosen because of the context that it offers to the Bible that we can't always get just in reading. And so, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's become something that I watch regularly. And let's see here. Wow, you guys are doing great today. Thank you for sharing. And let's see. And Jane shares she lives by Philippians 4:6. Oh, that's a great passage. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Powerful promise from Scripture, perspective. Again, if you're not a Bible believer, I hope that you're not going to be put off, but because of sharing. But there are other great pieces of information that are helpful. But as you can tell, a lot of people find that the Bible offers a lot of insight and wisdom for us. And and okay, Brian's got an interesting comment. Great comment, Rosemary. All the more reason to have a contrarian mindset. Refuse to participate and keep yourself intentionally encouraged. For those of you that haven't met Brian before, Brian is my friend, and he is all about intentional encouragement. And so good to connect with Brian if you want some ongoing encouragement. I actually got to, first time I met Brian was on his podcast. So this thing that we're talking about, and appreciate that Rosemary opened it up, but one of the things that I believe that we need to consider in terms of wisdom is that we are allowing ourselves to be driven towards fear and anxiety in so many ways, on so many fronts. And what Rosemary talks about, I believe, is a big one, is that we have become so reliant on media, news media, social media, to affect how we function. And so what I did is I offered in January, and I continue to share and offer it up as a way to gain wisdom and overcome some of what's going on in our world, especially this fear and anxiety. And that is to disconnect. And I know at different times I have to still do that. And depending on the level of noise going on, sometimes I have to do it more often than not. In fact, at the height of things back at the beginning of the year, I had already begun the practice of disconnecting, but I found with everything going on political, because I am try to keep myself well informed politically, that I just got to a point that I had to back up and take my own advice and purposely disconnect from a lot of the political conversation, not because I wasn't interested, but because it began to drive fear and anxiety, along with some other emotional responses for me that was becoming unhealthy. And so what I really encourage any wisdom seeker to make as part of their life is to disconnect from the noise, from whatever that noise is in your life. And the next step is don't just disconnect, but then replace it with observing with inwardly what's going on inside of us. So often we do not take the time to stop and really look inside of ourselves, see what our struggles are, what's bothering us, and so on. The other observation is look at the world around us. And one thing I encourage people is to, especially during this process, is look at your world, not the world. Because frankly, I have concerns, compassions, and for anybody anywhere, because one of the primary tenets of my faith is to love my neighbor as myself, and my neighbor can be someone across the street or on the other side of the world. So I don't mean to sound like I'm promoting being callous, but disconnect and observe the world around us. Okay. Look at what's going on that we can observe firsthand. Get away from everybody telling you what is going on. Observe for yourself. It's really interesting to me to talk to people and even have coached people that they're so caught up in their activity and their busyness, not business, but busyness, that they just don't even see the world that they're living in. And that includes, unfortunately, even those in their life, their families, because of this busyness. And we need to start there, because at least there what we observe firsthand is reliable. It is not dubious in nature in terms of motivation and so on. And so observe what's going on around you. The last part of that process is that after you disconnect and observe, then start seeking wisdom about it. Pray about it. Ask mentors. Seek out advice from wise people. Seek out information that is firsthand or not being spun, not have potential conflicts of interest in what happens. And so that is something I continue to encourage anyone that is a wisdom seeker to do. And so I really hope that you'll consider that, taking that challenge up and making it part of your day. And by the way, I really appreciate the background conversations. This is great because, and before we wrap up, I'm going to share something I've been thinking about and get your feedback on it. And Brian, you're welcome for the shout out. And it is just a heartfelt share. And what I'm enjoying is so many of you that are on here and that are sharing have become a part of what Wisdom Seeker is about. And I love the fact that I see you sharing with each other and encouraging. And welcome, Rafia. Rafia is a longtime connection from Canada, and glad to see you were able to make it, Rafia. And appreciate you being here. And let's see. Yeah, this is a good comment, and that from Sam. And indeed, when you hit rock bottom, the only way is to look up. And I've come to that place and turned the wheel over to the co-pilot. Even a captain needs a rest while trying to maneuver the ship in the midst of a great storm. And so, yes, I agree, Sam, that in fact, what I have figured out is I have in my life decided that I thought I was the pilot and let God be my co-pilot. What I figured out, he makes a much better pilot, and I'll be around as a co-pilot maybe if needed. And but he is he does a much better job. And so something that I want to share, a couple of tips. We're winding down with time, and one of the tips that I'm going to share is, as we go forward, I encourage you to even long-term disconnect from media, any of it. I know that we have divided approach, and some people say we have conservative media and liberal media. I have found anymore that, as Rosemary shared, a lot of any of it is motivated by shock factor and selling ad space and things like that. And I personally take offense at that. So I don't rely on any of them, but I do take the time to be well informed. So I encourage you to, as you observe what's going on, and frankly, boy, I'm probably going to step into this one, but hey, sometimes we got to just jump in with both feet. But the whole response that we have seen in regards to the COVID pandemic, I just encourage you to seek out information for yourself, not people's interpretation of it, but find data. And I know sometimes even the data can be dubious, but I encourage you to really look at it and find out for yourselves. You know, part of what we're having to do currently is we're having to evaluate risk. We've been doing that. Anyone that is adult does it all the time. Do I risk going out and getting in my car? Do I risk going out in the cold? Do I risk, oh goodness, so many different ways we're doing risk evaluation. And I encourage you, in the same fashion that you do risk evaluation in other terms, apply that same concept to this pandemic and really learn what is accurate and true as best we can know it. But one thing I can say, and one thing that I believe we have figured out in our conversation today, if whatever it is drives you to fear and even to the point of anxiety, something is wrong with it. Challenge that, because we aren't designed to live that way. And so if you encounter anything, people, media, whatever, and it is driving you to fear and anxiety, challenge it, please. That is wisdom that has to happen. If we don't, we're going to crumble. And I don't like to get negative, but I am also, the way God's gifted me, I see things differently, and I don't like to reside in a negative sense, but I have to tell you, I am concerned that if we don't begin to overcome this fear and anxiety and dig deep into our faith, that we're allowing ourselves to get in a place that is going to be bad for us in our cultures, in our societies. And it just is so critical. And I keep thinking and feeling impressed that the way to do that is this process that I feel like God laid on my heart back in January, and that is to disconnect, observe, and find wisdom. And I really encourage everyone to do that. And thank you, Jane, for the support, and I appreciate your comment. There is no one source. In fact, if I'm going to pick a source, I'm going to my Bible, because I think it's very alive and accurate today. But I don't trust any of the news media, frankly. So I find out information. I don't want to be the ostrich with my head in the sand. That's equally foolish. But we want to be sure and be well informed on our own. Don't get other people's opinion and live from it. Let's see. Dr. Singh makes a comment, says, following steps may be your ticket to getting rid of fear and anxiety disorders in your life. Learn more about your fear. Use your imagination in positive ways. Use your brain in different ways than usual. Focus on your breathing. Practice mindfulness and use nature as your therapist. Great tips, Dr. Singh. Certainly great information to consider. And I encourage you to remember body, soul, and spirit. In order to be healthy, we have to be growing and nurturing and balanced in all of those areas. It is how we're made, and it is important that we are able to maintain that balance and that health. Sam shares, one thing I'm convinced of, we're undergoing an awakening. It's the process that's difficult. Yes, Sam, I understand. I want that awakening and people to come to terms with life beyond what we are told to be and do. But I would prefer it to happen by the end of the day today, but I don't think it's going to. And thank you, Rafia. Appreciate it. I'm not sure why sometimes, by the way, it shows LinkedIn user with different people. So this is Rafia. Rafia says great points and makes total sense, Kevin, in the Bible. And a couple of other tips that I find is quite often fear is we build up fear in our own mind as we churn in our heads with it. And one of the quotes that I have now used is that we allow what's happened is these fears, these monsters, or these dragons that we feel like we have to slay really are not dragons at all, but lizards that we have overblown in our mind. And the more we just let it turn over in our head without checking it, without doing something with it, the more likely it's going to become a dragon, a big monster. And one of the things that I find that is pretty simple, but if we just speak out loud what's going on in our head about fear, and just hearing ourselves saying it, quite often we go, wow, that doesn't even make sense, or that's not even realistic. And also to voice it out to a trusted person in our life. Be sure to have someone, and a note of wisdom is have people in our life that we can share with and that we can talk about these things, because as we share them, a couple of possibilities. One is that this who we're sharing it with can offer us perspective, because a lot of times when fear goes to anxiety, we lose all perspective, which, by the way, one of the big things that we recognize in wisdom, it's about best perspective. It is about big perspective. And so just speak it out to people, share it with those that you trust and that can give you perspective. And by the way, something that, I'm big on design, passion, and purpose. And one of our designs that our Creator has made us for is to, in the words of the Bible, comfort others with the comfort we have received, which is a biblical way of saying, hey, folks, you've walked through some things and you've learned and you've overcome. Well, you help someone else with to overcome the things that you've already had to deal with. That's how we comfort others with the comfort we've received. Very important that we do those things, and that we build a community around being able to encourage. And again, not rose-colored glasses, not silliness, not naivety. We're never intended to be naive either, but real perspective and wisdom, so that we don't live in fear, that we can then, everybody talks about love. If we can learn not to live in fear, we have a greater chance of truly loving others and sharing that love with others. One of the things, before time gets away, and y'all can give me some feedback either here or on direct message, whatever. I'm thinking about starting a wisdom seeker group, so that those of you that have been kind enough to join and be a part of this along the way and keep coming back, so that we will have a place that we can share wisdom together, and do so kind of not in a public way, but among ourselves, just to encourage each other in wisdom and be able to push towards being wise in what we do in all aspects of our life. The other thing, I hope that you will help me by joining in another challenge, and it's the hashtag Wisdom Nugget Challenge. I know y'all have seen that, me using that. What I would like to encourage you to do is as you observe wisdom being shared on social media, especially LinkedIn, because that's kind of my platform. If you see something, tag it with hashtag wisdom nugget, because and also follow the hashtag, because the nice thing, I don't know if you've figured out, I was a little slow to come around to understanding. The hashtags are a way to get connected to information quickly. And if you click on the hashtag on LinkedIn, it will take you to anywhere that showed up. So it's a place you can find some wisdom that has been shared by others. So thank you, everyone. Yeah, Rosemary, thanks for hanging in there till late in the evening. And I appreciate everyone's comments, and I appreciate your encouragement that we can gain wisdom from each other, and we will gain wisdom and share that. And I hope that you will join me each Monday. Join us each Monday now. We have regulars. Thank you, everyone that shows up regularly, and have invite others to join us. You'll see, I don't claim to have all the wisdom, and it's not about just my opinions. It's about sharing with each other and encouraging each other to find wisdom in different areas of our life and to begin to walk in it. So thank you. We'll be back next Monday morning, 8 o'clock, right here. LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, any of those outlets, you can find it and follow, and go and seek wisdom and share it with others. Thank you, everyone. God bless. Hey, Ashfaq, glad to see you. Dr. Shukla, didn't see you till now. Welcome. Glad to have you. Thanks for everyone being here. God bless and have an amazing week, and seek and gain wisdom. Thanks.